I stood there, completely frozen. The noise of the grand ballroom faded into a dull roar in my ears. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above like thousands of cold, mocking eyes. My fingers dug into the fabric of my simple black dress until the seams bit into my palms. On the brightly lit stage, my mother was smiling. Vesper Quill looked radiant in a floor-length emerald gown that caught every light in the room. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She held the microphone with the confidence of someone who had waited her whole life for this moment. Beside her stood my brother Draven, wearing a sharp suit and that easy, charming smile he always used in public. And right next to them was Celeste Rowan, the woman I once trusted more than anyone, my best friend from college, now laughing softly as she adjusted the floral arrangement on the display table. All three of them, shining together. Vesper raised her hand, and the room fell into an expectant hush. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice warm and smooth like aged whiskey. "Tonight, I am beyond honored to present our signature dish. This creation has been in our family for generations. It carries the heart, the soul, and the legacy of everything we stand for." She paused dramatically, placing one delicate hand over her chest. "None of this would have been possible without the love and support of my beautiful family." The applause exploded. A wave of sound crashed over me. I felt it like a physical blow, sharp, deep, and final. 6 years. 6 years of waking before sunrise in my tiny, windowless kitchen. 6 years of burned fingertips, tear-stained notebooks, and quiet victories no one ever saw. 6 years of perfecting every single one of those recipes while rocking my sick son Kairos back to sleep at 3 a.m., while scraping by on whatever money was left after rent and medicine. Those dishes weren't just food. They were my blood, my hope, my only chance to build something better for us. And now, they were serving my heart on their menu. My knees weakened. I leaned harder against the cold marble column behind me, the stone pressing into my spine like an accusation. My breathing came shallow and fast. For one terrifying moment, I thought the floor might tilt and swallow me whole. How could she? How could they? I remembered the night I had cooked that exact signature dish for her, the pride swelling in my chest as I watched her take the first bite. I had looked at her with shining eyes and said, "Mom, this could change everything." She had smiled back then, a soft, knowing smile. I thought it was pride. It wasn't. It was calculation. Draven's gaze swept across the room and briefly met mine in the shadows. For half a second, something flickered behind his eyes. Guilt, maybe? Before he quickly turned away and raised his glass with the rest of the crowd. That tiny hesitation cut deeper than any knife. My own brother couldn't even look at me while they celebrated stealing my dream. Celeste leaned in and whispered something in Vesper's ear. They both laughed lightly, the sound floating across the ballroom like poison wrapped in silk. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk straight onto that stage, rip the microphone from my mother's hand, and tell every single person sitting in their expensive chairs the truth. I wanted them to know exactly whose recipes they were cheering for, whose sleepless nights, whose tears. But I didn't move. My body refused to obey. Instead, I stood there in the dark corner, invisible, while the people who were supposed to love me most paraded my soul on stage and called it their own. The applause continued, louder and louder, each clap hammering another nail into the coffin of the family I once believed in. In that moment, something deep inside me cracked open. And from that crack, a cold, quiet, terrifying fire began to rise. This isn't just a story about a mother who betrayed her daughter. This is a story about what happens when the people who should protect you become the ones who try to destroy you, and how one woman learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to burn everything down and rise from the ashes stronger than before. 3 weeks. Just 3 short weeks after that glittering night, everything I had built began to crumble. I stood alone inside Quill's Ember long after closing time. The dining room was dark, save for one weak overhead light that flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. Empty tables stretched out in front of me like silent witnesses. No reservations, no laughter, no clatter of plates. Only the low, steady drip of a leaky faucet in the kitchen that I no longer had the energy to fix. The silence pressed down on my chest until it hurt to breathe. It happened so fast it felt unreal. First, the VIP guests vanished. The same people who had toasted my mother on stage stopped answering my calls. Their tables at Vesper's Flame filled up instead. Then the reviews started pouring in, one star after another, flooding every platform like poison. Stolen ideas. Copycat cooking. She pretends it's her own, but we all know where it really came from. Each comment felt like a slap across the face. I sat slowly at the table nearest the window, my hands shaking as I scrolled through the endless stream of hatred. My eyes burned. The numbers on my banking app stared back at me in cold red. Overdue payments, declining balance, warnings from the bank about the loan I had taken to open this place. How could blood turn into a blade so quickly? I remembered driving home that night after Vesper's grand opening, rain hammering the windshield, tears streaming down my face. I had told myself it was just jealousy, just one bad night, that the truth would eventually surface and people would return. I was so naive. By the end of the second week, suppliers began pulling out. One after another, they cited reputation risks. Delivery trucks that used to stop every morning now drove straight past my door. Even the kind old man who supplied my fresh herbs left a short message saying he was sorry, but he couldn't afford to be associated with controversy. Then came the court papers. They arrived at 7:12 a.m. on a gray Tuesday morning. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers and felt the ground disappear beneath me. Vesper had filed for temporary custody of Kairos. The reason was written in clean, clinical language. The mother is emotionally unstable and financially unfit to provide a safe, stable environment for the child. She had attached screenshots of the one-star reviews, photos of my empty restaurant, and even pictures of me looking exhausted while holding Kairos during one of his asthma episodes. My own mother was trying to take my son away from me. The papers slipped from my hands and scattered across the cold floor. I dropped to my knees right there in the middle of the dining room, pressing my forehead against the tile. A raw, broken sound tore out of my throat. Not quite a scream, not quite a sob, just pure pain. "Not Kairos," I whispered into the empty room. "Please, not him." He was only 7. He still asked for me when he had nightmares. He still reached for my hand when his chest felt tight. He was the only light I had left in this world, and now the woman who gave birth to me was using him as a weapon. I thought about calling Draven. My thumb hovered over his name for what felt like forever. But what could I possibly say? "Brother, did you know she was planning this? Did you stand there smiling while she prepared to take my child?" I couldn't press the call button. The betrayal still burned too hot, too fresh. Hours passed. The sky outside slowly turned from black to a dull, lifeless gray. I stayed on that floor until my knees went numb and my eyes ran dry. When I finally forced myself to stand, the restaurant felt different. Colder, smaller, like it was closing in on me. I walked slowly between the tables, running my fingers along the edges where I had once dreamed of happy customers. Every recipe notebook on the shelf now felt like evidence against me. The dishes I had poured my soul into had been twisted into weapons aimed straight at my heart. The pain was so overwhelming it almost circled back into numbness. But deep beneath that numbness, something else was beginning to stir. Not courage yet, not hope, just a quiet, seething fire that refused to be extinguished. A fire that whispered in the darkest part of the night. "They used your blood to cut you, but they forgot that the same blood also runs through your veins." This story is about the devastating moment when your own family becomes your greatest enemy, and how that kind of betrayal can either destroy you completely or quietly awaken a strength you never knew you carried. I don't remember how many days I stayed on that floor. Time had lost its meaning. The restaurant had become a tomb, cold, dark, and filled with the ghosts of every dream I once had. But one rainy afternoon, the front door creaked open. Elowyn Greer stepped inside, shaking rain from her coat, carrying 2 paper bags that smelled faintly of warm soup and fresh bread. She didn't say a word at first. She simply set the bags down, pulled up a chair across from me, and waited until I finally lifted my head. Her eyes were steady, kind, but not pitying. "You're not dead yet, Selene," she said quietly, "and neither is your fire." That was the first crack of light in weeks. Elowen had been my assistant since the early days, the one who stayed late to help plate dishes, the one who held Kairos when he had asthma attacks so I could finish service. She never asked for much. She just showed up, every single day, even when there were no customers left. Later that same evening, my phone rang. Thorne Calder, the sharp-tongued, influential food critic who had written my very first glowing review years ago. His voice cut through the line like a blade, calm, direct, and mercilessly honest. "I've seen what they're doing to you," he said, "and I've watched too many good chefs let bitterness destroy them. Don't be one of them." He didn't offer sympathy. He offered truth. "Revenge is easy to scream about," he continued, "but the ones who actually win? They build something so undeniable that the world has no choice but to look away from the liars." His words stayed with me long after the call ended. That night, I sat alone at the same corner table where I had once cried. The court papers still lay scattered on the floor like fallen leaves. My hands shook as I picked them up. For the first time in weeks, the tears didn't come. Instead, something colder settled in my chest. A decision. Not loud, not dramatic, just ice cold and crystal clear. I would not scream at my mother in public. I would not drag Draven through the mud. I would not waste what little energy I had left on a noisy court battle I might lose. No, I would disappear. I would build again, from absolute zero. And I would do it so quietly, so perfectly, that when the time came, they would feel the weight of their betrayal without me ever needing to raise my voice. The next morning, I woke before dawn. My body still ached with exhaustion, but my mind felt strangely sharp. I packed away every visible notebook, every old recipe card. I closed the doors of Quill's Ember with a soft click that sounded final. Then I drove to a small, forgotten warehouse on the edge of the city that Elowen had quietly helped me secure. No sign, no announcement, just 12 tables and a modest kitchen. I stood in the empty space, breathing in the scent of concrete and possibility. My fingers traced the stainless steel counters. For the first time since that horrible night, I allowed myself to feel something other than pain. Not hope yet, but fuel. Pure, burning fuel. I thought of Cairo sleeping peacefully at home, trusting that his mother would fix this somehow. I thought of Vesper smiling on that stage, believing she had won. I thought of Draven looking away when our eyes met. And for the first time, the fire inside me didn't feel destructive. It felt purposeful. Elowen watched me from the doorway, arms crossed, a small, proud smile on her lips. Thorne had already sent a single text. "Make them choke on their own lies, quietly." I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. Instead, I rolled up my sleeves, turned on the lights, and began to cook. Not the old recipes. Something new, something sharper, something deeper, something that would take months, maybe years, to perfect. This was no longer about survival. This was the first spark of vengeance. Cold, patient, beautiful, and completely unstoppable. This story is about the exact moment a broken woman stops waiting to be saved and decides, in silence, to become the kind of force that no betrayal can ever break again. 6 months. 6 long, unbroken months of absolute silence. I disappeared so completely that even my own shadow seemed to forget me. No statements, no explanations, no social media, nothing. Just the quiet sound of my knife against the cutting board in a hidden corner of the city. In an unmarked warehouse on the industrial edge of town, I opened a secret pop-up restaurant, 12 seats only, no sign on the door, no website, no phone number. Guests received nothing but a plain cream envelope with a handwritten note and a single date. Every evening, exactly 12 people walked through that anonymous door, and every single one of them had once celebrated my mother on that glittering stage. I cooked for them in silence. The dishes were mine, the same foundation I had spent 6 years perfecting. But now they were deeper, more refined, more honest. Each plate carried a small, handwritten card that told a different story, not of stolen legacy, but of quiet mornings, a mother fighting for her child, and flavors born from pain instead of performance. I watched from the kitchen as they ate. Some closed their eyes mid-bite. Others set their forks down slowly, as if afraid the moment would break. A few had tears in their eyes. They tried to hide behind expensive wine glasses. No one spoke much. The silence in the room felt heavier than any applause I had ever heard. They were tasting the truth. And it was far more powerful than any lie my mother had served. During the day, I sat in Dr. Juniper Hale's quiet office, the soft light filtering through half-closed blinds. She never rushed me. She simply listened as I unraveled the knots of rage and grief that still lived inside my chest. "You don't have to forgive them," she told me one gray afternoon, her voice steady and kind. "But you do have to stop letting their betrayal live rent-free in your mind. Turn the pain into precision." Some sessions left me drained. Others left me strangely clear-headed. Bit by bit, the chaos inside me began to settle into something sharp and focused. I was no longer drowning, I was aiming. Across town, Vesper's flame began to feel the invisible wound. Elowen would quietly update me. Certain longtime VIP tables now sat empty on weekends. Regular customers canceled reservations with vague excuses. Some guests left early, their faces troubled, as if carrying a secret they couldn't quite name. Vesper started asking questions. I could imagine her pacing in the elegant dining room, her perfect smile cracking at the edges. Harlan grew quieter, his usual confidence replaced by restless phone calls to old contacts, trying to understand why their golden empire was slowly bleeding without any visible enemy. They had no idea it was me. How could they? I had said nothing. I had shown nothing. One quiet night after the last guest had left, I stood alone in the small kitchen, wiping down the counter with slow, deliberate movements. The warm glow of the hanging lights cast long shadows across the stainless steel. A memory rose uninvited, Vesper's radiant smile under the spotlight, her voice declaring family legacy, while my heart bled in the dark corner. My hand paused on the counter. The old pain stirred, sharp and familiar. But this time it didn't swallow me. It sharpened me. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had once trembled with betrayal, and felt a new kind of strength settle into my bones. "You took my voice," I whispered into the empty kitchen, so softly only I could hear it. "Now watch what happens when I choose silence instead." Elowen appeared in the doorway, watching me with quiet understanding. She didn't speak right away. When she finally did, her voice was low and certain. "They're starting to feel it, Selene. The uncertainty, the doubt, it's eating at them." I met her eyes and gave the smallest nod. For the first time since that terrible night, I wasn't just surviving their betrayal, I was becoming the silence they could not escape. And silence was proving to be the slowest, most elegant poison of all. This story is about the hidden power of patience and strategic silence, and how sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's simply becoming so extraordinary that your enemy's lies begin to suffocate them in the dark. The night of the city's annual Culinary Excellence Awards arrived like a storm no one saw coming. The grand ballroom was packed with chefs, critics, investors, and the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers hung heavy overhead. Cameras flashed. The air smelled of expensive wine and anticipation. Both Vesper's flame and my secret pop-up had been invited. I stood backstage in a simple black dress, heart steady, but hands slightly cold. Elowen adjusted the collar of my dress without a word. Thorne Calder gave me one slow nod from across the room, his way of saying he was ready. On stage, the announcer's voice rang out, and the award for Outstanding Family Restaurant goes to Vesper's Flame. The room erupted in applause. Vesper Quill rose from her table like a queen, emerald gown catching every light. She walked to the stage with that same radiant smile I remembered from the night she stole my recipes. Draven followed a few steps behind, clapping politely. Harlan sat at the table looking proud. Vesper took the heavy glass award in both hands, tears glistening in her eyes, the kind she could turn on and off like a switch. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling with emotion. "This means everything. My family poured our hearts into this restaurant. Every dish carries our legacy, our love, our truth." The applause swelled again. Then the giant screen behind her flickered to life. It wasn't planned. A clip began to play, an old television interview from 6 months earlier. Vesper's face filled the screen, her voice clear and sharp. "People are saying my daughter created these recipes? That's ridiculous. She's always been imaginative. But these dishes are mine. She's nothing but a copycat trying to ride on my success." The words echoed through the silent ballroom. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Vesper's smile froze. The color drained from her face. She turned toward the screen, mouth slightly open, as if she could stop the video with sheer will. But it kept playing. Another clip followed, her calling me unstable, ungrateful, and a disappointment who tried to steal from her own mother. The applause died completely. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. Then I stepped onto the stage. No fanfare, no dramatic music, just me, walking calmly under the bright lights with a small cart carrying 6 carefully plated dishes. I didn't speak at first. I simply began to serve. One by one, I placed the new creations in front of the judges and key critics. The same foundational flavors they had once praised at Vesper's Flame, but now transformed. Deeper, more soulful, undeniably mine. The first critic took a bite. His eyes widened. He looked up at me, stunned. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs turned into applause. Then the entire room rose to their feet. The standing ovation thundered around me. Cameras flashed wildly. Journalists rushed forward. Vesper stood frozen on stage, the award still clutched in her hands, her perfect makeup now streaked with tears that looked painfully real this time. Draven wouldn't meet my eyes. Harlan stared at the floor, shoulders slumped. I walked slowly toward my mother. She looked smaller under the lights now, older, broken in a way no one could fake. I stopped just 2 feet away. Our eyes met. For the first time in over a year, I spoke directly to her. My voice was quiet, steady, and carried across the microphone. "Blood doesn't always mean family." The words hung in the air like a final note. Vesper's lips trembled. She tried to say something, but no sound came out. I turned and walked off the stage without another word. Months later, on a crisp spring morning, I stood outside my new restaurant. The sign above the door read, "Quill Reborn," in elegant gold lettering. Inside, Kairos ran between tables, laughing as Elowen pretended to chase him. Thorn Calder sat at the counter, tasting the day's special with a satisfied nod. Dr. Juniper Hale watched from a corner table, a soft smile on her face. I looked around at the warm lighting, the full reservation book, the scent of fresh bread and simmering sauces. This place wasn't built on stolen dreams. It was built on ashes. And from those ashes, I had forged something stronger, truer, and entirely my own. Kairos ran up and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Mom, can I help plate tonight?" he asked, eyes bright. I smiled down at him, a real smile, the kind that reached all the way to my heart. "Yes, baby. Tonight, we do it together." Outside, the city moved on. Somewhere across town, Vesper's Flame was struggling. Tables empty, reputation cracked, legacy questioned. But I no longer needed to look back. I had learned the most elegant revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming so undeniably successful that the people who tried to bury me no longer had any ground left to stand on. This story is about how the deepest justice doesn't always come with shouting or revenge. Sometimes it simply comes when you rise so high that those who tried to break you can only watch from below and realize they created the very woman who outgrew them. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process, but every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.